Hope is here. The way to break free with your host, Angela Pedigo, will light a flame within you. Host Angela Pedigo is an author, speaker, and certified life recovery, grief, and joy restoration coach. Angela uses her own life experiences to help you navigate and guide you to success. She also has developed tools that incorporate her faith and her drive to overcome any obstacle in life. So please welcome the host of The Way to Break Free, Angela Pedigo.
Welcome, everybody, to The Way to Break Free. I am your host, Angie Pedigo, and I'm so glad you could join me today with my special guest, Miss Chris Troutt. Chris has so much experience and so much wisdom. I cannot wait to dive into this with her today. She has a center called the Papillion Center, and she's going to share with us all about that, what she does there. She is a woman that just has God in her heart so much, and the things that Jesus has done for her when he came looking for her, and it's a really cool story. So I can't wait for her to share that with you guys today. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me here.
I'm just so glad that you're here. You have been instrumental in helping myself, even just in my own personal stuff from some training and things that you did with us, but has also helped us to help so many other people too. And so, I can only imagine the lives that you personally have touched and that God's used you for. So I just can't wait to explore that. Tell us a little bit about the center first. Let's go there.
Sure. Well, I'm super excited. Next year we'll be celebrating our 15 years, which is
wonderful.
Huge, right? For our Tennessee office. And then we have another office in Kentucky. And it'll be 5 years for that. So,
nice.
Yeah, God really laid on my heart probably about 16 years ago that there needed to be a place where families could find hope and healing. That at the time I was working in a situation where I was working with a lot of adoptive families, and they were not really seeking out help until they were just worn out and feeling very alone and very stuck. And many times that included children who had been prenatally exposed to alcohol, prenatally exposed to drugs, and really their brains and their bodies just worked a little differently. And when you don't know something, you don't know what to do with it.
Yes.
Right.
I want to ask you a question about that because one of my dear friends, and she's actually been on the show, but she has several adopted children and some of her own. And, it gets to that point where you're tired and you're worn out. Does the center target the child? Does it target the parents, or does it target the whole family unit to learn how to kind of mesh together?
Right. Well, the work that we've done for 15 years, really 14 years, has really been the work around the family as a whole.
That's beautiful.
Children are not the agents of change. Adults are.
Yeah.
Right?
Ooh, that's a good statement.
Yeah, they're not. While we place that burden on children often, it's not really their job to do that. It's the adult's job to figure out what's going on and how to best help that child. So yes, our program does. Now, our Tennessee office has shifted in the last year to where what we're primarily doing now is trying to educate all the arenas, whether it's a school or church or medical professionals or counselors, whatever that looks like, right? Whatever arena that child's life touches, there needs to be at least one champion in that arena that understands that child's brain and what's going on and how to best help that child have success.
Do you get a lot of good response from different organizations embracing that?
I think that what we get is a lot of organizations who understand that there's a struggle going on that they don't quite know what to do with.
Yes.
So I would say that that's probably the biggest response that we get in looking for solutions, looking for help.
Yes.
As to what do I do now?
And I want to say this for anybody who's like leaders of organizations, there's no shame in not knowing what to do in those situations. But it is our job to learn. It is our job to learn and embrace. How can we as a unit help these children, help these families? So I think that what you're doing is absolutely beautiful. That actually excites me quite a bit that the center's going in that direction.
Well, I'm really excited about it. And, in general, the systems that we have set up in any arena, again, is really set up to help assist and help the child who is functioning in the upper brain, the upstairs brain, to have success. But a child from a hard place is going to function more dominantly in the downstairs brain, or in the primitive brain. And that looks differently, right?
That
And
more
so
survival
it
instincts.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think parents too, you can attest to this, whether or not you know, this is what you see, but would you say that parents, when they do learn and they understand, they gain that understanding of what's really going on in that child's brain, that it kind of builds a new level of empathy or a new level of understanding and connection with the child?
Absolutely, yeah. When we can take a step back, and it's not about our parenting as much about, because we, you know, as a parent, whenever our child just consistently falls down, we feel a little like it's all our fault, right? We kind of take ownership of all of that. We in some way, our children reflect us.
Yes.
And for that child to have success means that we're doing something right. And so whenever it feels like that child is struggling so much, it feels like I'm messing up as a parent. But whenever I can understand that child's brain is working differently, and I can do some things, I love to see God working in families, and I love to see hope coming back. Yes. I love to see joy coming back in a family, you know, that has been just so weary. I just love to see that. I think that's so amazing.
I think families who are operating in a high stress environment like that don't even realize how much they're missing out by missing the absence of peace.
Right.
Until you get it, you know, like until you reach that point. But if they could just see a glimpse of that and get a taste of that, I think more would reach out for help, you know, or like train me, teach me, help me to understand my child. Or there's no shame in that. You can raise two children the exact same way, and one may go right, one may go left. You know, we're all wired differently.
We are. Yeah.
It's about learning the wiring.
It is, and I love that, because, you know, James talks about we don't know what we don't know, but when we learn, we're now accountable to it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so I think it's that way with parenting as well.
Yes. So tell me, what drew that passion out of you to do? You had mentioned that, you know, God put it on your heart that you needed this space, but what fuels the passion for it?
Sure. Well, our last child came home from Lithuania with a diagnosis of fetal alcohol syndrome. And
from Lithuania, where you adopted this child.
We did.
So tell me, how many children total do you raise?
Well, we have 12 children and 25 grandchildren, which are the best. Yeah, they're just the best.
I don't know what I would do.
They're the reward, right? Just loving. Not that I don't enjoy my children.
Yes.
Adulthood is wonderful. And honestly, it's just that little piece in those teenage years.
Yes.
I tell families all the time, when you're holding that brand new baby and they're nuzzling in and just loving you, that sear that into your brain. Just sear it. Because there will come a day.
They're going to be teenagers.
Yes, yeah. But really, it was for the love of one child.
Okay.
It really was. She came home with a diagnosis of fetal alcohol syndrome and had some pretty serious health conditions. And as a result of that, you know, we're looking for services, looking for understanding of what does this mean and how do we help her succeed. And what we found out was there really wasn't much help out there. Yes. It really wasn't. So it was time to do something about it. 17 years. We just celebrated 17 years.
Do you feel like that's still an issue? That a shortage of services?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Maybe I should shift that a little bit. We have a lot of services that are present, but not a lot of services that understand what happens when you have prenatal exposure to alcohol and drugs, what happens to the brain and the body, and the results of that, and then what to do with it to help set them up for success versus failure.
Well, I have to say, not every center, you know, is aligned the same way. I mean, obviously, you have to work out, you know, the brain aspect of it, the science part of it, but you also come into it with a heart of compassion and love that you don't necessarily always get everywhere you go.
Sure.
So I knew there was passion in there that you had. Sure. So this child, so tell me the steps. What happened from there? You decided.
Well, we brought her home and we started looking for services and didn't really find any. What we learned after that was TBRI, or trust-based relational intervention. And it completely transformed our lives. It transformed our family. It transformed how we recognized what was going on with her and with some of our other kids and ourselves, right? Because you have to look in the mirror at yourself before you can be fully present with the person in front of you and address that. So God really used that to transform our lives, but then also as a foundation for the center. We are a faith-based center, and so we absolutely are part of, believe strongly in the Christian faith. And God really used TBRI to place a foundation that we could build off of to help families.
So what did you see that start doing in your child's life?
Well, she regulated, which was wonderful because at the time she was a very busy child. She hit the ground running and rarely slept more than 2 or 3 hours at a time.
Wow.
For a long time. But once we started settling the brain and helping the brain to get settled down and started learning how to help her regulate and learning just some skill sets, then we could really just enjoy her.
Yes.
Instead of constantly managing her.
Yes.
Which is different.
What would you tell parents who are struggling at home right now in this situation, but they just have this huge fear of reaching out for help because of what does that mean about me?
Sure. Oh, reach out anyway. Yeah. There's hope if you can latch onto the right people and to the right circumstances. There really is. And would just encourage any family that's in the trenches that doesn't know what to do. Find a trust-based relational intervention practitioner near you. They're all over the world at this point.
Yes. I loved sitting in your training session with the TBRI training recently, and it is so on point, you know, and it kind of takes you back to your own childhood, So yeah, if we can set ourselves aside long enough to not feel the personal attacks or like make it about us, we can set us aside for a minute to really say, okay, I'm going to face this for my child. That's being the biggest advocate for them to be, is when you're willing to look at it even when it hurts.
Yeah, boy, isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about like where all this came from in you. Like you said that God had put this on your heart, so obviously you have a relationship with God. Sure. Let's go into theirs. Like, tell me about that. How did you come to know Jesus?
I was living in Colorado. It was 1985, and I was not in a good place in my life. I was partying and did not know anybody besides people who I was doing that with. I was relatively new to the community. And one night I was very broken. Some circumstances had happened. And I remember sort of like halfway on my bed, halfway on the floor, and just crying, and I just saw Jesus just standing there saying, if you would just give it to me, everything would be okay. And I did. I was so broken. I just did.
Would you say that was like an emotional rock bottom moment for you?
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah. I didn't know what else to do, and felt very broken, and all the weeds of my life, right? And just that surrender moment.
Yeah. It is hard to surrender. Like we will white knuckle whatever it is that we need.
I'm really good at white knuckling. Yeah, that comes real natural for me. Yeah.
Till the blisters are there, absolutely. And you're just holding on. There's no skin left on your hands. We as humans, we do that, and the the release is in the release.
It is.
You know,
it is.
we just have to let go.
Yeah. And I really didn't know anything about him. I wasn't really raised in the church. I had grandparents that went to church. My mother had been very wounded in the church, and as a result, no longer attended. Was really careful about me being involved as a result of that.
Trying to protect you from it.
Sure.
Did that make it harder for you?
Hindsight, I think I probably thought that earlier in my life, but looking back now, I think it made it a little easier in the sense that I didn't grow up with a lot of expectations about what you should or shouldn't be as a Christian. I just came to know Jesus.
You built relationship before you built religion.
I didn't know anything about religion. So relationship was really what it was all about. And then I had someone who walked very closely with me in the midst of all of that. So
yeah. So here Jesus saying, give it to me. And all of a sudden it became so easy to just let go.
Yeah, it really did. And then, I got up the next morning and life went on.
That's beautiful.
Right?
That's beautiful. There is a continuation of this story, but we're going to catch a quick break and we'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBN Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
We're back from the break, and Chris was just sharing with us about the moment that you just released and let go and let Jesus in. So is that your salvation moment?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah, that was the moment I just said yes.
Yes. So what happened after that? Tell us about this mystery woman.
Well, 3 days after that happened, a woman knocked on my door. We were relatively new to the community. And she knocked on the door, and of course I answered, and she kind of welcomed me to the community, explained who she was. She had 3 kiddos. At the time, I had 3 children. And finally, she just threw her hands up and said, "Look, I was praying this morning. God told me to stop here. Do you need something?"
Oh, it was probably as awkward for her as it was for you.
Yes, it probably was. It was brave of her to stop. And when she asked me that, I just burst into tears. And I spent the next, I'm not sure how long, at least a couple of hours, pouring out my whole ugliness, all my story, everything that was broken. And she listened.
Wow.
And when I finished with my story, she said, "Now let me share mine."
Oh.
And she shared part of her story. And from that moment, she literally just walked with me. She just walked with me. She made Jesus real to me. She would, in her conversation, say things like, I don't know. I just need to talk to Jesus about that. And I'd be like, really? We talk to Jesus? That's what we do? Okay, we can talk to Jesus. And she would say, come on, let's go pray. And, we would get on the floor and we would just pray. And I would look when we got up and wow, it's been an hour. Wow, this is really cool. And just the word came alive. She would call me and say, I'm studying here. Get your Bible and let's look at this. And here's what it said to me. What's it say to you? And she would take me out for coffee. And one time in particular, I remember walking out on my steps and her saying, listen to the worship. Worship, where is the worship? What's going on?
From a coffee shop.
At the time, I had not plugged into a church yet. And I had no idea what she was talking about. And she just looked at me and she said, listen to those birds. They're just worshiping Jesus. And I was like, okay, there's birds. Listen to the birds. Right? But what it did was it brought Jesus alive to me. And it tuned me in to all things that just are here for him.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
It sounds like her life was like what she showed you of it was like a walking Bible.
It was. Yeah, it really was.
Because
it wasn't about religion.
Yeah.
It was about just having this relationship with Jesus. And of course, I did get plugged into a church and I did go through discipleship in that church. And I'm really grateful for that. I think that that's really important. There's a place for that. But there's also a place that we are all called to discipleship. And we should all have someone in our life that we're pouring into like that.
Yes.
And that person's going to change over time. There should be someone that we're looking up to, that we are seeking advice from, and there should be somebody we're just having coffee with and having chats like this.
Yes.
Right? And then there should always be somebody that we're just pouring into and raising up and helping them to gain a better foothold and a better understanding of what it means to walk with Jesus.
How much time would you say she spent with you?
Oh, it was years. Yeah, no, it was years. We just did life together. Our children became friends. We, in the beginning, it was more intense. In the beginning, it was more directed. But it was always, it shifted, right? I was this person that she was bringing up, and then I became this person that we were just doing life together with. And it lasted for a really long time. Yeah. And recently we were able to reconnect again, which has been so much fun.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll get to maybe have coffee again someday.
That's cool. Does she live around here?
Not here, no, but not terribly far. Not so far nice. I can't go see her.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what did her example of discipleship, because discipleship is so important and it is about, there's so many people out there in this world that have never been taken to church. They've never, probably heard a lot. There may be some opinions or upbringing stuff like you were talking about. Your mom was trying to shelter you from her hurts, experiencing her hurts. What did her example do for you in your life as far as who you wanted to be?
That's a good question. I think what it did more than anything was teach me the importance of walking closely beside someone, right? The importance that this is not the quote unquote church's job.
Yeah.
That our pastor, who I love dearly, he has a role, but his role isn't to fulfill my role. Right. Like each one of us as believers in Christ have a role to pour into another individuals over time. Right. And I think that that's probably what she taught me more than anything, was just the gift of time and walking beside someone, being willing to be messy, right?
Get
To
your
be
roll your
close,
sleeves up.
roll your sleeves up, and just be in the mess and to help guide a way out of it.
Yeah. Do you feel like that fuels your passion even today for like at the center and other people that you mentor in and all the children that you have? Like,
oh, I'm sure,
yeah.
absolutely. It was part of my story that God ordained, and I didn't know her; she didn't know me. There was a God ordained that meeting, right? And she was obedient to it, which also encourages me that whenever He lays something on my heart or somebody on my heart, to just be obedient, just speak whatever you need to speak, and then go from there.
You've seen the benefits of it. Like, you personally experienced the benefit of obedience to Christ and how He was coming after you in that moment when He sent her as the messenger.
Right.
And you've also experienced the benefit of having someone be a mentor and a disciple you, just do life with you like you're talking about. I think when we have a personal experience with how transformative something like that can be in our own lives, we value it so much more that we want to pour that into other people. It's harder, I think, sometimes to tell people who've never experienced that, hey, you need to go do this, or like you need to find somebody to be this for them or be that for them, and they may not value it as much because they may not have got the experience of that. But I'm so grateful that you did, because I'm sitting back on the outside looking in, and I'm watching, as you're explaining this, and I'm thinking, wow, how that woman's commitment and dedication is like reflective of what you do today. And I think about you on that floor, and then I think about what you do today, and she's like a transition person.
She
for
is.
You in your life.
Absolutely, yeah. And the ripple effect, like none of us will ever know this side of heaven, right? Exactly. The ripple effect. Exactly. Recently, I was in Minneapolis for a funeral of a dear friend's daughter, and I told her, she's worldwide, she's known worldwide, and I told her before I left, you will never know this side of heaven, the ripple effect, right? You'll never know. And I think that's just true. I think that we're just called to keep putting one foot in front of the other. It's our job to keep positioning ourselves and doing what God has given us to do. But we may never know the side of heaven.
Yes.
The ripple effect.
Yes. And if He gives it to you to do it, there's a reason.
Yes.
Like, we don't even have to ask. We don't have to question it. Just do it.
Just take the step, make the call. Yes, just step into it and trust that while I may not know where that step lands, that He's there. He's the foundation under it.
Yes. That day, that she knocked on your door, a seed was planted.
It was.
And, sometimes we plant seeds and we don't get to see them sprout, but somebody else will come along and water them. It might be your job today to plant. Yeah. It might be your job tomorrow to water something that somebody else previously had planted. But the harvest is God's. So.
It is. And I think as a counselor that's something that often we don't always see the end results of what's going on. And I know in your role it's the same way, right?
Yes, it is.
That we do a lot of planting. And we do a lot of watering, but we might not get to see the full results of what.
How do you keep momentum and motivation going when you don't always get to see results?
I think it always goes back to the call. Yeah. Right. When there's a call in your life, I don't know that you can get away from it completely. Yeah. Right.
Well, and your lane. Like when you're in your call, your lane, your role, and like anything else that belongs, like we're on assignment. I feel like it's work orders, it's like, we've got our work orders. We have to go do this today. Yes. And
yesterday I was on a call with someone in Montana. She's a counselor. Well, she's actually a pediatric nurse, neuropsychologist, something along that lines. I'm not sure. I have to go back. But one of the things that was really cool in that was it didn't take very long to be on that call to realize she was a believer.
Oh.
Right. And so the call turned into while we're creating a network of therapists in Montana, and of professionals in Montana who understand prenatal exposure to alcohol and drugs. That was the purpose of the call, but it turned into the iron sharpening iron.
Oh,
right?
nice.
It turned into being able to encourage someone who has stepped out believing the call in her life that, was feeling a little overwhelmed with everything that is ahead of her. And I love how God does that. I love how God ordains those moments, right? And we have to sort of set ourselves aside and be willing to step into the moments.
Yes, absolutely. So, what you do, you're pouring into people, organizations. You have a lot of demands on you with your job. What do you do for self-care? What do you do to keep your cup full?
Yeah. Well, besides coffee.
Besides the coffee.
Besides coffee. Yeah, we have a rule at my house. Nobody comes downstairs until mom's had 2 cups. That's the way it goes.
Safe.
Yes. Just the way it is. Absolutely. Time with Jesus. Yeah. I'm an introvert by nature. My life requires me to be an extrovert. So time with Jesus.
Time with Jesus. There would be no other way, no other better fill up than that right there.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
We're back from the break. Chris, we were talking about that moment that you were in, that rock bottom moment, that emotional rock bottom. You had just surrendered. Jesus was telling you, if you just give it to me. And in that moment of surrender, like we were talking about before we went live today, makes me think about you being that soul ready to receive that, what he wanted to do in you. And 3 days later, he sends this lady to start planting seeds in you. And share a little bit about that. Let's talk about that soul.
Sure. Well, it's really been heavy on my heart lately, and if I'm really honest, I don't know. It's one of those things I'm still kind of wrestling through what all of it means. But I was reading in Matthew 13 and just the importance of the seeds being planted, right? The seeds are planted, and yet the enemy comes along behind that in the night and plants all these weeds in the midst of it, right? And how that chokes out the good seeds. I was in a season that was very broken, and ultimately in that hindsight, my children are raised now, but my children were also in that season with me. right? And they were children that were being raised in that brokenness. They were being raised in the weeds of brokenness in that, and have their scars as a result of that, right? But the importance of understanding to to make sure that the soil is ready, that it is prepared for the Lord, that we can receive His goodness, right? And recognize when a weed is planted, that we can pluck it right out.
Yes.
As I was leaving this morning, I noticed my flower bed that desperately needs my attention, right? Which is probably what I'll do later today. But it's got weeds in it, right? And those weeds are going to choke out everything in that flower bed if it doesn't get tended to. But the children have been heavy on my heart. They really have. Just that it's unintended consequences. When that soil has been so infiltrated with weeds. You just think about, like, crabgrass is what comes to mind for me, because it's my enemy right now. But how it just sinks into the soil, and how the roots of it, if it's not plucked quickly, how the roots of it will overtake a garden. It'll overtake a flower bed. It will overtake a yard. And then those roots, they're planted so deep that if you don't catch it early, for years you will be dealing with that crabgrass. In that you can pull out the top part, and there's still these roots that are planted there. And the weight of the children that carry the burden of being raised in the thickness of that has just been heavy on my heart.
Yes. And we can, I love the gardening aspect. My grandmother raised strawberries all my life, and we would raise a family garden over there. And there's so much that a garden can teach you. So much. Like, if you've never raised a garden, I encourage everybody to do that, because it will teach you so many life lessons. I've loved that parable about the soil in Matthew that you were talking about, because there's 4 types of soil that it describes. And, we're a lot of times I've heard a lot of sermons preached about, we've got to sow the seeds. And one time I was reading that, and it came to me about, what soil are you? Like, what soil are you?
Right.
Are you, and it made me think about that family garden, because I was a little girl. Of course, I'm going to tell my age here a little bit. And my grandmother, she always had those lard buckets that she would cook with. And we'd have these other kind of little pails, but they had little handles on them. And, my uncle, he would go through and he would, dig the rows and break up the ground first to disc the ground, and then, get the ground really soft. I loved running barefoot in that soil, and when it was real soft, it's just like powder. And then cutting the rows, and then, you'd have to plant the seeds, and somebody would come along and be scattering the seeds, and somebody would come along and be scattering the fertilizer over it. And then somebody's coming along and covering the rows back up. I loved doing that with my bare feet. And I was a little girl, but I always thought it was really cool to cast the seeds, but I would either drop them, and they're all too many here, they weren't spread out, or I would sling them too far, and then I'm throwing them on the side. And in that parable, when it's talking about when they're sown by the roadside or by the wayside or whatever, the birds come and they take those seeds away. And I was thinking about that garden, it was waste. Like, every time they would tell me, don't throw them over there, like, or whatever, you're wasting them. And the birds would come and take them away. So they never took root. The garden happened to be right by the road. So this parable really hits home with me. And then, it goes on and talks about seeds cast, but they don't take root. Like, they shoot up quick for a second, but the sun scorches them, and then they don't take root. And I think about the weeds that grow up in the middle of a driveway, and they're like, they shoot up quick, and they're always there. That root is there, but and then the ones that are growing up and they're in the midst of the thorns, and like you said, weeds are choking them out. And I had an instructor one time at a bank school that I was at, and he said, if it grows too fast, it's a weed. You got to pull that out. My grandmother took such pride in her strawberries and in her garden. Like, she was out there every day, all day, practically, with her little hoe and her little bonnet on her head. And she was making sure there was not a weed in that garden. She tended it. She was intentional. You know, it took intention to do that. And what a major example she was, you know, to like, not just us, but so many people would come and work in those fields and the
life lessons that it taught you.
Life lessons. But it didn't matter where those seeds dropped, unless it was in the soil that had been worked and tilled and broke up and prepared and nurtured and fertilized, and, you know, covered up. And
something you shared that really stood out to me was how much fun it was as a child running barefoot in the soft ground.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Running barefoot in that ground that had been prepared as a child. You know, there is an easiness to that. There's a sense of joy in that. But if that ground hadn't been tilled yet, and it was a ground full of thorns and weeds, the likelihood's pretty high that if you had to run barefoot through that life would look different. Right?
You would hate it.
You would hate it. Yeah. And you might not know how to till the soil to get the weeds out.
As a child, you wouldn't.
Right.
If I as a 7-year-old little girl had to be responsible for figuring out how to make that a garden, that would have never happened.
Right. Which is why it's so important, right?
Yes.
It's so important that we as adults come along and whether it's an adult or child that we're walking beside, we really have to see that child in them and to help get that soil prepared.
Yes, it's our job as an adult to learn how to create good soil.
It is.
And it's our job to learn how to be good soil. Like, what soil are we, you know? And, you know, there's times in my life where I could say I was the soil by the wayside.
Absolutely.
It was no good. I was the soil, you know, where the weeds were growing up and then the sun would scorch it. I was the soul in the midst of all the thorns.
I was the crabgrass.
Yeah. I'm thinking the thorn bush. I'm going for the thorn bush.
Yeah, definitely taking root. But, you know, so much of the time we have expectations of people who maybe didn't have the privilege of having a loving home, right? They didn't have the privilege of meeting Jesus early on to know that they were loved well.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And as a result of that, they have no clue on how to tend that soil.
Right. And I don't know that adults do. Like, that is an example. That parable hits home with me because of my childhood experiences in the garden, specifically in the garden. But I don't, like, if you sent an adult out and said, okay, go plant a garden, would they know how?
Right.
You know, not everybody has a tractor, not everybody has a disc, not everybody has the tools and the equipment that they need, nor the knowledge. When do you break the soil?
Sure.
When is the time to break the ground? When is the time to plant this particular seed? I did as an adult. I wanted to do this one time. I wanted to raise strawberries. Like, I wanted to do it to say I had done it. And my son was 5 years old, I guess, at the time. And so I called my uncle. I said, tell me everything about a garden. And I told him everything I wanted to raise. He was like, how big is this garden that you're going to plant? But anyway, I went through everything. He told me exactly what month to plant. He told me what to do to tend them. If I ever got stuck, I would call him and he would tell me how to make the lettuce grow better, or how to, you know, my mom, she would come up and the wasp invaded the beans. So she came or the peas, I guess it was peas. And she would come and pick peas all the time, but I grew them strawberries. And we didn't have the tools, but my son and I, he had a little hoe and I had a little hoe. We didn't have anything to cut rows. And so we took a string and he went from one end of the garden to the other. And we cut the rows was so crooked. They were so not straight at all.
Doesn't matter though.
Didn't matter. We had the best time. And to be able to recreate that for him at that
Sure.
age, just in that moment. The memories that we made there. I've never been able
Mhm.
to get a garden to grow since, but that one year it grew so well. And
Yeah.
it was so refreshing. It's okay that you don't know that you don't know. It's okay as an adult
It
that
is.
you don't know
It
how to
is.
do that. It's not okay to stay that way. And I'm not
Right.
talking about a literal garden, but I am talking about
The
what can we learn
brokenness.
to heal our own selves so
Mhm.
that we have some sort of foundation that
Mhm.
child that's in our care can heal.
Mhm.
Being
Well,
that
and just like you did, right? You reached out to someone who you knew how,
yes,
right?
yes,
And we don't know. It's okay to not know. It's okay to be broken. We all have been, right?
yes,
It's okay to be there, but it's not okay to live there. It's not
exactly.
okay to raise children up in it and create another cycle of brokenness,
Yes,
right? Like if not for yourself, for the love of a child,
yes,
that you rise above it and say, I don't have a clue, but I'm going to start knocking on doors to find out who does.
yes.
And I won't stop until I find somebody that can help me.
Yes, we got to humble ourselves.
Mhm.
And it's the longer that people hold on to guilt and shame, like
Mhm.
no one benefits from that.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
one there, we feel that from our pasts a lot of
Mhm.
times. But to stay in that space, no
Mhm.
one's ever going to benefit from that.
Right.
You won't, your children won't. Um, it's time to let go.
Mhm.
It's time to surrender
Mhm.
and like become that good soul yourself. Grow
Mhm.
together to grow with your children. So we're going to take another quick break and we'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
We're back from the break. Chris, we're talking about all this fun in the garden and how a lot of kids miss out on those kinds of times that, we got to enjoy as a kid. There's just nothing greater than playing in the dirt. I love it. I still love it to this day. Don't get to do it but I still would love to. How important is play for kids?
It is so incredibly important. There's a lot of research done around how a child will learn a new skill set. And if we can teach them through play, they will learn it in a much, much, much shorter time, a new skill set, because play evokes a part of our brain that can last a lot longer. It's a safe place to be able to do that. But honestly, it doesn't matter if you're a child or you're an adult, right? That play is so important in that. It's important that families play.
Yes.
that now it looks different as we're adults. Last year we did a snowmobiling trip with some adults within the family, and of course the grandkids came along too. But it was so much fun just to play, just to play as a family, right? To just go and play. And we've really tried to incorporate that as at our family gatherings and things, because most of my children are raised now. Play is just so important.
It is. Yeah. It's a bonding time.
It is. And it really opens up parts of your brain that whenever you are afraid, whenever you're in a really fragile place, you're in downstairs brain or primitive brain, and you do not have the ability to play. You're in survival mode at that point. Yes. But whenever you can start tapping into things that open up those parts of your brain, right? It's just fun. If you can't start anywhere else, start with a funny movie.
Yes.
Right? Like to find some way to incorporate joy back in. It helps the brain open up and say, okay, maybe I'm safe here. Maybe I'm okay. Maybe I can take another step.
Yes.
Right. In doing that. And children flourish in those environments. If we can, when maybe we need a child to stop doing something, we can yell at them for that. Right.
Yes.
Or we can go, wait a minute, you forgot. Try it again.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So a little kind of playful engagement with them. It gives them an opportunity to fix it. Right.
I get concerned that play is almost becoming play as we know it, like that engagement with people interactively that way is almost becoming a lost art because of technology.
I agree.
And it, like the kind of play you're talking about is let's not sit and play video games, but let's set aside all of those things and let's engage together. And I think the more generations that pass that didn't experience that kind of play don't know how to play. Like I've seen several adults that I don't know how to play with my children. I don't know what that looks like. And one of the things you can elaborate on that more than I can, but one of the things that I just try to tell adults is be what you needed at their age. Go back to your child's age. What did you need in that moment?
Sure.
And be that.
Sure. Well, and I would say that your child will not remember whether or not you made the Barbie dance correctly.
Yes.
Or whether or not when you had tea with your daughter that you held your finger right or anything else, right? Your child's not going to remember that. What they remember is the time that you invested in it and that it was lighthearted, that it was joyful. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. We are in a time in our world where we are the most connected we have ever been in the history of mankind. And yet we are feeling the loneliest than what we've ever been.
Yes.
And we have children that we are consistently seeing at 4 and 5, 6, 7 that are suicidal and struggling with anxiety and depression. When I first started as a therapist, I might truly see a suicidal client maybe once or twice a year. When in the last year, a couple of years ago, we were hospitalizing anywhere from 5 to 10 a week.
Oh my goodness!
Because they were truly suicidal.
Wow.
Yeah, we've got a problem.
That's a massive problem.
Yeah, we've got a problem. We have a generation of children that, like we were talking about the soil, that are being suffocated.
Yes.
In a broken soil and suffocated by the weeds and trying to survive in that. And that's not the way God created them. God created them differently. They need different things than what they have. And that is not a blame on the parents. It's not a blame on the system. It's simply let's recognize where we're at and let's do something different.
Yes.
Because what we're doing is not working.
Yes. Yes. It's time to quit looking in the rearview mirror, sling it out the window.
Right.
Let's be windshield driven.
Right. That's right. Let's move forward and do better. We have to do better for the next generation.
We do. And it takes so many. Like, not everybody's necessarily called to engage hands-on or with children who are needing that extra help. But we can be the support system for those who are.
That's right.
We were talking about that before the show.
Yeah. Everybody's called to something, right? And it could be that you are called to adopt or to foster, and that's fantastic if you are. But if you're not, then you are called to that orphan.
Yes.
And that may mean that you're the person who brings over food once a week. Yes. Or you're the person who says, you know what, go take a nap. I'm going to take the kids out to play.
Yes.
Or I'll come help do laundry.
Yes.
Or maybe, it's a guy that can say, hey, I'll take them fishing. Yes. Or they can come help clean out my barn.
Yes.
Doing some things, just investing a little bit of time. That family needs that desperately. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we are all called to do something.
Just thinking back to my son, some of the best memories that I think that we had sometimes were cleaning together, mm-hmm. like doing house chores, but making it fun,
sure.
Doing something fun with it. Like any little thing, especially it makes them feel helpful. And like you said, play teaches them life skills.
It does.
And it all plays together. It all works.
One of my favorite stories of one of the mothers that we worked with, she had, I can't remember, 3 or 4 boys. And she kept a laundry basket full of Nerf guns.
Yeah. And
if she was having a particularly stressful day, or the atmosphere in the house was climbing, like mm-hmm. it does for all of us at some point, mm-hmm. she would just stop. She would set a timer for 15 minutes, and she'd pull out the Nerf guns. And they would chase each other around the house with Nerf guns, just having a heyday. When the timer went off, the Nerf guns went back in the laundry basket, and they went back in the closet. Right? Like,
that's beautiful.
What an incredible way to interject the fact that I recognize that as we're going up, our brains are becoming fragile, right? And that I need to shift that, and play is a way to do it.
That's funny.
It worked for all of them, and it was a way for her to help manage.
Well, Chris, I've enjoyed you being on the show today so much. I want to ask you, what would you leave listeners with today?
There's always hope. There's always hope, even in those most desperate times, that if you will just surrender it, that God will put people in your path to instill that, to speak life into you, and then you're responsible to do that to someone else.
That's good words there, guys. If that's you today and you need that extra help, reach out, somebody somewhere close to you, and take that first step. Let go and surrender. I thank you guys for tuning in and watching today. Like and subscribe so that you can be notified each week when we go live. And we want to thank Bold Brave TV for hosting the show. And we will see you next week.
This has been The Way to Break Free with your host, Angela Pedigo. The one thing Angela attributes her personal victories to is her relationship with God and her deep faith. Tune in each week and hear stories and testimonies of people in personal and professional trenches and how they overcome them with their own faith in God. The Way to Break Free has something for everyone, everywhere. Right here, Wednesdays, noon Eastern on the Bold Brave